You know, usually when we talk about the Menendez brothers, the conversation, it just sort of stops at the spectacle.
No doubt.
The TV movies, the TikTok trends, the sweater vests in court, it's all just pop culture.
Right.
But looking at the stack of documents you've pulled for this deep dive, I mean, we're looking at something much darker and way more complex.
We are, and honestly, that spectacle is exactly what distracted everyone from the actual behavioral reality of this case for 35 years.
Right.
We aren't here to relitigate the gossip. We really need to look at the documents, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rulings, the new legal filings from 2023 through 2025, and of course, the historical record.
Right. We're here to open Dossier, #33, the Gilded Cage. And I was reading through the source material, and what really struck me is how this case is kind of a perfect mirror.
A mirror. How so?
It just reflects whatever cultural anxiety is happening. Back in the 90s, it was all about greed. Now, today, it's all about trauma.
Precisely. And our mission here is to analyze that Gilded Cage. We have to reconcile two things that just don't seem to fit together.
The spoiled, wealthy Beverly Hills kid.
Exactly. That image and the reality of a home that the defense argued was essentially a torture chamber. To understand that systemic blind spot that defined this case, we have to start where it all ended, August 20th, 1989.
Let's set the scene. And I don't mean the movie version. I mean the reality of 700 North Elm Drive. It's this Mediterranean-style mansion. It's a hot night in Beverly Hills.
It is the quintessential noir setting. You have this veneer of absolute perfection. But if you strip that away, the atmosphere inside that house was suffocating. And on this specific night, the sources tell us Jose and Kitty Menendez are in the den. It's a Sunday.
Just a normal Sunday night.
The most normal. They're eating berries and ice cream. They're watching a James Bond movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. It's arguably the most domestic, safe moment you can imagine.
And then the illusion just shatters.
Completely. Lyle and Erik, who are 21 and 18 at the time?
Yeah, that's right.
They burst in. And they aren't carrying handguns, which might imply, a spur-of-the-moment thing. They are carrying loaded Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns.
That creates a very specific forensic signature.
It does. This was not a crime of passion. It wasn't a heated argument that got out of hand. This was a surgical strike.
Jose was shot 6 times, including a fatal shot to the back of the head.
But what's fascinating in a really grim analytical sense is the overkill when it comes to Kitty.
The sources detail that she was shot 10 times, and there's this horrific detail from the court documents. She was actually trying to crawl away. But here's the part that I think really cemented the prosecution's case later on. The reload.
That is the pivotal moment.
Can we just walk through that? Because in the movies, you just keep shooting. But in reality, shotguns run out of ammo fast.
They do. And this is where that whole self-defense argument really hits a brick wall for a lot of legal experts.
Okay, so how did it go down?
According to the ballistics, the reconstruction, they fired until the guns were empty. So, the threat is neutralized.
But then,
Lyle walked out of the room. He went all the way out to the car. He got more ammunition. He loaded the weapon. And then he walked back inside to deliver the final fatal shot to his mother.
that walk to the car, that's time.
It's time.
That's time to think.
Exactly. That gap in time requires cognitive processing. It requires a decision. And the prosecution argued that the reload turns this from a panic response into an execution.
It just shifts the whole narrative.
Completely. From scared kids to cold-blooded killers.
And immediately after, the performance begins. They don't flee the country. They start cleaning up. They're collecting shell casings.
Right, because they're worried about fingerprints.
And then they try to build an alibi.
A very clumsy one at that.
Yeah, they go to a movie theater to buy tickets for Batman. But they realize the tickets are time-stamped, which would prove they weren't watching the movie when the murders happened, so they just abandoned that plan.
Right.
They end up dumping their bloody clothes and the guns on Mulholland Drive. Then they head to the Taste of LA festival. It's like they're trying to populate their timeline with these normal rich kid activities.
It's a frantic attempt to establish presence elsewhere. But the real performance, the main performance, happens when they return to the house to find the bodies.
The 911 call, I've heard it. Lyle is sobbing. He screams, "Someone killed my parents." I mean, it sounds visceral. It sounds terrified.
It sounded perfect to the first responders. And notice the immediate narrative seeding.
What do you mean?
When the police arrive, Lyle suggests it was a business-related hit. He tells them it might be the mob. He even points out that the shooters targeted the knees, which he says is an old mafia signature.
And he's directing the investigation away from the family from the very beginning.
From day one. And for a while it worked. The police didn't even test the brothers for gunshot residue. They totally bought the Grieving Sons Act.
Which brings us to phase 2, the forensic debrief. Because while the police are out looking for mobsters, the brothers are doing something that looks, well, it looks incredibly guilty.
This is where we see the concept of the performance of grief just completely clash with reality. In the months after the murders, they didn't act like people who were in hiding.
No, or people paralyzed by trauma.
Not at all. They went on a spending spree that is, it's honestly staggering.
Staggering is the word. We're talking about an estimated $700,000 spent in just a few months.
Right.
Lyle goes out and buys a Porsche Carrera. He buys 3 Rolex watches. He even buys a whole restaurant, Chuck's Spring Street Cafe in Princeton.
And Erik hires a private tennis coach. He travels to Israel for tournaments. They're just living this high-flying lifestyle.
There's this one visual detail from the sources that always just blows my mind.
Let me guess. The trading card.
The NBA Hoops trading card of Mark Jackson from the 90-91 season. Have you seen this?
I have. And it's a literal snapshot of the blind spot we're talking about.
It's unbelievable. If you look in the background of the photo, just over Mark Jackson's shoulder, you can clearly see Lyle and Erik Menendez sitting courtside at a Knicks game.
Front row. Weeks after killing their parents.
Right there in the picture.
And that image is exactly why the Gilded Cage theory is so hard for the public and later a jury to swallow. You see that card, you see the Rolexes, and you think...
Greed.
Greed. You think they did it for the lifestyle. But psychologists and the defense would later argue that this wasn't greed, it was manic flight.
Manic flight. What does that mean in this context?
It suggests they were trying to fill a void the size of the Grand Canyon. They were buying things to numb the trauma, the guilt.
Yeah.
The theory is they weren't enjoying the money. They were frantically trying to feel anything other than the reality of what they'd done.
But like you said in Forensic Noir, every receipt looks like a confession.
It does.
Yeah.
And the spending is ultimately what made the police suspicious. You can't claim you're terrified of a mob hit while you're sitting front row at Madison Square Garden.
True. But the whole house of cards really tumbles down because of a confession.
To a psychologist, Dr. Jerome Oziel.
This is just a masterclass in how fragile secrets are.
It is. Erik confesses first.
What?
Lyle finds out and allegedly threatens Dr. Oziel. So Oziel has his mistress, Judalon Smith, eavesdrop on the sessions for his own protection.
Which of course backfires spectacularly when they break up and she goes straight to the police.
And that brings us to phase 3. Deep psychoanalysis. This is where we have to look at the tapes.
The infamous Oziel tapes.
The December 11th, 1989 tape is the smoking gun for the prosecution. On this tape, Lyle is recorded saying they killed their mother to put her out of her misery. He talks about his father being impossible to live with.
But what's missing from that tape is just as important as what's on it, right?
Precisely. In these initial recorded confessions, there is no explicit discussion of self-defense. There is zero mention of the sexual abuse that would become the absolute centerpiece of their trial defense later.
And the prosecution just latched onto that.
Of course. They argued the abuse narrative was a fabrication, that it was created after they got caught, designed purely to get sympathy.
So we go to the first trial in 1993, and the defense, they shift everything. They move from mob hit to the Gilded Cage.
Right. They start claiming years of horrific sexual, physical, and emotional abuse. And this is where the legal concept of imperfect self-defense comes into play.
Okay, can you break that down for us? Because imperfect just sounds like it shouldn't count.
Think of it this way. In a standard self-defense case, a reasonable person would have to believe they were in danger.
Right, like if someone points a gun at you.
Exactly. Anyone, you, me, the listener, would agree you're in danger. That's objective. Imperfect self-defense is different. It argues that the defendant honestly believed they were in imminent danger, even if that belief was totally unreasonable to an outsider.
So they argued that because of the years of abuse, their warped reality made them believe Jose was about to kill them that night.
Even though he was just eating ice cream.
Yes. And in that first trial, it worked to an extent.
To an extent. The juries were deadlocked. And interestingly, the split was often along gender lines.
But then came the second trial in 1995.
And the system, you could say, corrected itself, or maybe overcorrected. The second trial was much stricter. The judge excluded a lot of the abuse evidence. They started calling it the abuse excuse.
Why did the judge do that? What changed?
Well, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals documents we have show the logic. The judge ruled that there wasn't enough evidence of imminent peril. Remember the reload?
That walk to the car.
That walk to the car. Legally, that break in the action makes it very hard to argue you were in immediate danger of being killed right that second.
So without the full context of the abuse allowed in court, the second jury just sees the Rolexes, the Porsche.
And the reloading.
Result, first-degree murder, life without parole.
They traded the Gilded Cage of Beverly Hills for a concrete cage. And for decades, that really seemed to be the end of the story.
Yeah, a systemic blind spot where society just couldn't reconcile the rich kids with the victim narrative.
But, and here's where it gets really interesting, history has a way of digging things up. Phase 4, the haunting conclusion. We have to fast forward to the present day, specifically the window between 2023 and 2025.
The narrative shifts again.
It does, because of new evidence that just wasn't available back in the 90s.
Right.
This is why we have to keep looking at these old dossiers. First, a letter was discovered.
The letter from Erik to his cousin.
Right, to Andy Canal, written in 1988, months before the murders.
This letter is huge. In it, Erik seems to be talking about his fear of his father. He writes something like, "I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's worse for me now."
Exactly. And if that letter's authentic, it corroborates that the fear existed before the crime. It wasn't just some story cooked up by a defense lawyer in 1993.
And then there's the Menudo connection.
Roy Rossello, a former member of the boy band Menudo, came forward alleging that Jose Menendez, who was an executive at RCA Records, sexually assaulted him in the 1980s.
And this challenges the prosecution's portrait of Jose as just a strict, demanding father.
It suggests a pattern of predatory behavior that went beyond the home. It lends a certain credibility to the brothers' claims.
So armed with all this new stuff, the brothers file for habeas corpus. And in May 2025, there's this massive breakthrough.
A judge resentences them. They get 50 years to life.
Which, because of youth offender laws, made them immediately eligible for parole. It looked like they were walking out. The media was ready for it.
They were.
But then comes the twist. August 2025. The parole board meets, and denial.
This is such a critical detail in our source stack.
Hi.
Why? After all that, why were they denied?
I read the reasoning and I was shocked. The board cited ongoing rule violations, specifically regarding contraband cell phones in prison.
Contraband cell phones.
They're keeping them locked up because they had flip phones.
It feels petty on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah,
You had a cell phone, so you stay in prison.
it really does.
But you have to look at how a parole board thinks. They didn't just cite the phones. They cited deception and blind spots regarding their rehabilitation.
Deceptive.
To the board, sneaking in a phone suggests that you still believe rules don't apply to you. It's just you still have that arrogance, that Prince of Beverly Hills mindset, where you can just outsmart the system.
So it speaks to a character flaw they believe hasn't been fixed.
That's the argument. That is a harsh interpretation after 35 years of being model prisoners otherwise.
It is, but it shows that the Gilded Cage narrative follows them even into a concrete one. They're still being judged not just on their actions, but on their perceived privilege.
And with the habeas petition for a new trial rejected in September 2025, the legal doors have slammed shut one by one.
So despite this whole cultural reevaluation, despite the docuseries and all the public support, they remain incarcerated.
It brings us right back to that mirror you talked about. The case remains a mirror for us. When we look at the Menendez brothers, do we see the cold-blooded greed represented by the Rolexes and the reload?
Or do we see the reactive violence of broken children trying to escape a monster?
The sources give us ample evidence for both. It's the ultimate paradox.
Jose Menendez was a man who achieved the absolute pinnacle of success. He was a CEO, a power player.
And that's the predatory alchemy we talked about.
Yeah.
He had the ability to turn business ventures into gold, but he seemingly turned his own home into a catastrophe.
He built a fortress to keep the world out.
But the threat was inside the whole time.
And even now, with the smoke cleared from North Elm Drive decades ago, the question just hangs there. When we look at a perfect family, are we seeing the truth or are we just seeing the performance?
That is the lingering question of Dossier #33. The bars remain, but the narrative, it just keeps shifting.
Stay observant. Dossier #33 is closed, but the cage remains open.
But the darkness remains. Your next dossier is ready, and it's even more disturbing than this one. Click here to open it.